Welcome back to the show, everybody. Check out these headlines. David Schwartz answers the question, is it possible that the US dollar could eventually be the reserve currency on the Ripple protocol? Somebody roll that beautiful intro.
Digital Perspectives with Brad Kimes. Come on in.
Welcome back to the show. You can follow us on Twitter and YouTube for exclusive content. Right now, $1.08 trillion market cap for crypto. The market happens to be off by 1.3% this morning. Good morning, everyone. Bitcoin, 26,000, slightly over, 1570 and change for Ethereum. We see Tether market cap now at 83.1 billion plus. Number 5 spot, XRP back down to 49 cents, off by 2.7 in the 24-hour and off by 1.3 on the 7-day. Ladies and gentlemen, we are going to discuss a real macro topic, and you are going to love it. I guarantee you that. And you're going to want to make sure you know that precious metals are going to be a part of the new financial system. I certainly believe it, and I certainly know that this is the best place to go to get precious metals right now, gold or silver, the best deals over spot, but you got to use the code, use the email and the phone number underneath this video, but use the code DIG-GOLD, D-I-G Gold. Tell them Brad Kimes from Digital Perspectives sent you. And you know what else? With everything changing so drastically, it's Glint, your chance to have physically allocated gold that you can save, spend, and send just like cash instantly with MasterCard debit card. Two remarkable products that empower you in a very uncertain time. Let's get started right here, ladies and gentlemen. You know, in the extension of understanding ETHgate, during the time when ETHgate was getting its free pass, we saw this. We saw a lot of media companies, people come out, like Kyle Samani, declare it was quite clear to them and his company that XRP was a security. We know now that that was absolutely incorrect. But we have to wonder, why was it so quite clear to Kyle Samani that XRP was a security at that time? Was he fed information? This is a great question, I believe, for Steven Narioff. Do you know if shorting of XRP was done with insider knowledge of ETHgate and the free pass? I mean, listen to this guy's conviction here.
I think it's a super good thing for the ecosystem. Chris Dixon, who's one of the GPs there, and I think Katie Hahn's the other. Chris is an LP in our fund in Multicoin, so I know them for a while. Overall, it's a great thing for the ecosystem. We're talking to a lot of endowments today. So right now we have, for example, shorts open on Ripple and Litecoin. Like Litecoin, in my view, has no reason to exist. It was a fork of Bitcoin. It's just been sitting around.
It's a harsh assessment.
The only investment thesis I've ever heard for Litecoin is it's a testnet for Bitcoin, but that's not an investment thesis. And so, it trades. It's got a 2, 3, 4 billion market cap, whatever the number is. But it doesn't really have a reason to exist. It's clearly more risky than Bitcoin, just kind of structurally in terms of brand and everything else. When we look at Ripple, Ripple they keep selling into the market. Based on kind of the SEC's guidance from a couple weeks ago about Ether being not being a security, it's quite clear to us that Ripple is a security. We don't know when that news is going to drop, but the catalysts seem to have kind of gone away from Ripple, and we have very high conviction that it is a security. And so,
what brings on all of that high conviction, I'd like to know? Maybe Steven Narioff can shine a light on that for us. We'll keep you up to date on it. Now, I want to start here because this is really where we're going today. And we have this and a clip of David Schwartz from 8 years ago. And I happen to believe it strikes a chord in me that feels very relevant for the moment we are currently in. I want to start with this reminder right here. Shout out to Cypress Demonacore and his team for putting this one together. We covered this originally, but I want to play this clip for you to show Barry Eichengreen, who's also been on the, I think it's Blockstars podcast with David Schwartz. He has sat in the big meeting with the central banks with Brad Garlinghouse and Christine Lagarde, the IMF, and everybody else around the world, central bankers. He has posed a question, could there be a run on Ripple? And obviously that would mean Ripple and XRP because of its nature as a bridge asset. But this is a point I want you to hear about Bitcoin that Barry Eichengreen makes while Susan Friedman is on this panel discussion and a conference about CBDCs as well. Take a listen.
I will start with cryptocurrencies more generally and then move to CBDCs and the future of the dollar. I would start with the observation that history provides ample documentation of the fact that competing private monies are inefficient. One need only think back to the history of free banking in the United States in order to illustrate the point. So on the basis of that historical experience and others, I do not believe that plain vanilla cryptocurrencies or stablecoins are a threat to the dollar. Plain vanilla cryptos, Bitcoin and its ilk, are too volatile, too expensive to transact with.
Plain vanilla cryptos like Bitcoin, too volatile, too costly. You know, this is something we've known, but it sets the tone here because this is an 8-year-old clip here. And shout out to Elizabeth, I think kicked this one up, and I had quite a few people send this to me. I wouldn't want her to call me a thief again, for God's sakes. She didn't harvest this material from nowhere. This actually came from Josh Barrett here, which is really a remarkable interview. I listened to this whole interview last night, and I don't mind telling you, John Barrett, I believe it is. This guy is super smart, and boy, does he ask great questions. I want you to listen as he asks here, is it possible that the USD could eventually be the reserve currency on the Ripple protocol, Ripple network? David Schwartz says it's certainly a possibility and expands beyond that. Take a quick listen as this clip opens up. And I give you a piece of this, the clip opening up about XRP value. Take a listen.
Now, it's different with dollars. With dollars, they connect to the real world, the non-electronic world, in various ways. And so in order to make a dollar electronic, someone has to hold that dollar and someone that you trust to pay you back that dollar on demand. Now, this is exactly what banks do in traditional payment systems. If I want to pay you money and I have $50 in my pocket, I'm probably not going to mail it to you. What I'm going to do is I'm going to have that $50 in a bank and I'm going to send you a check. But the important thing to understand about the way that trust works in Ripple is that it doesn't matter whether the sender and recipient trust the same party. So I can trust a local bank in my country or my city. You can trust a local bank in your country or your city to hold the funds. And the payments just work perfectly smoothly. So it's not like a big central system where everybody has to trust the same party, but somebody has to hold the funds, and the individuals who put those funds in the system have to trust those people who hold it. It's the same thing that you do with a check. Like if you want to receive money, you have a bank account somewhere and people pay you by making that bank owe you more money. And you're trusting the bank that they'll pay you that money. If the bank disappeared and didn't pay you that money, then those payments, you wouldn't actually be able to materialize the funds from those payments. One of the things that we're working on is getting regulated financial institutions that have FDIC insurance and analogous protections in other countries to be those trusted entities to hold the funds. That's another reason it's important to get financial institutions on Ripple. You're already trusting financial institutions to hold your money. So if you can use your local financial institutions, then it really isn't any additional trust.
Now, to address the value of XRP for our listeners and for that guy.
Well, obviously it's hard to predict the future, and there's certainly no such thing as a sure thing. Risk and reward always come in pairs. So the thinking is that if you have a large number of currencies on the Ripple network and a large number of institutions issuing them, it will be very difficult to find a direct path between two currencies. So if you have US dollars issued by a local chain and you want to pay somebody in Guatemala who gets cash at his grocery store, the probability that there'll be someone offering to trade one of those currencies directly for the other is pretty low, and that the liquidity will probably be through some intermediary currency. The Ripple network has a native intermediary currency called XRP, or sometimes called Ripples. And the advantage of Ripples is that there is no counterparty. There's nobody. It works just like Bitcoin. Your Ripple balance is just a number on your Ripple account on the Ripple network. And the theory is that because XRP doesn't require any trust or anything in common, it can flow between any two accounts. You don't have to agree to have somebody hold it for you. And so if that becomes the premier intermediary currency, then two types of people will want to hold XRP. One will be people who don't know what currency they'll need next. if the path from dollars to euros tends to go through XRP, then if you don't know whether you'll need dollars or euros, it makes sense to hold XRP because then you only have to pay half the spread. And then the other thing is market makers. If you're just trying to make a market and people who are selling their dollars want XRP because that's what they need to buy euros, then if you want to be able to buy dollars, XRP is the currency that you're going to need to hold to buy them. If that's the way it plays out, then the demand for XRP will go up, and therefore the price will go up. But again, nobody's crystal ball is clearer than anybody else's. That is certainly something that may or may not happen. So it happens automatically when you make a payment. The network finds the cheapest path. That might be through XRP, it might not. It could be through US dollars, it could be through Bitcoin. There could be multiple paths that you draw from so that you get the very best offers on multiple order books. So you wouldn't be consciously aware unless you really drilled into what was happening behind the scenes. You wouldn't necessarily be consciously aware of what intermediary currencies you held for a notional split second. But because XRP can flow between any two accounts and is trustless, it has a privileged position inside the Ripple network that could cause it to be preferred as an intermediary currency.
I see.
If that happens, demand will go up.
I see. Now, what if it doesn't happen?
It certainly might not. It could be that, for example, the Federal Reserve decides to issue dollars directly onto the Ripple network, and everybody thinks that's the perfect intermediary currency. And then XRP doesn't get that kind of role, in which case you would not see that increase in demand.
I see. Is it possible that just as the USD is the reserve currency of the world right now, against what a lot of people would like to see, is it possible that the USD could eventually be the reserve currency of the Ripple protocol, Ripple network?
It's certainly possible. You could also see another government, any country could do this, introducing, let's say, gold, 100% reserve-backed gold on the Ripple network, and people might decide, ooh, that's what I want to use as my reserve currency because maybe the government of China, let's say, does that and people trust them. There's certainly any number of ways this could play out. To some extent, Ripple Labs has bet on XRP. Ripple Labs holds an enormous number of XRP, and our primary business model is that they'll appreciate in the future. But of course, there's no guarantee.
I see. So now that concept that the US dollar could be the reserve currency of Ripple, of course, you know that people hearing this show and hearing that, if they've not heard that before, talk about ripples, right? Talk about ripples going out. That's going to cause a lot of people to be afraid and to think, wow, we don't want Ripple because the U.S. government, I'm sure now, since they heard this episode of Bitcoins and Gravy, they're onto it for the first time. They're slow, they're sleeping usually. Now they're going to work as hard as they can to get the U.S. dollar to be the reserve currency of Ripple, and we're back to the same place we were before Ripple and Bitcoin and all of this. What do you say to someone like that?
Well, they have to compete in a fair playing field. So the intermediary currency could be the U.S. dollar, and you can still hold whatever currency you want. You can hold Bitcoin, you can hold Ripples, and that would just be where the liquidity is. And they would have to compete on a completely fair playing field because people don't choose intermediary currencies. They just make payments with the cheapest path they can find. So it's going to be competitive, just like it is outside the Ripple network, except people will be able to move more easily between currencies. So if one currency has a small advantage that only affects a narrow group of people, they can still hold that currency without having the large cost that they would normally have to bear from making a different choice.
I see.
So it does enable more freedom of choice with currency. And in that kind of market, it remains to be seen what will be the preferred currency. It could be Bitcoins.
Yeah. This is exciting stuff. I mean, it sounds kind of like you're hinting at sort of a free market.
It is. It's a very free market. It's essentially a perfectly free market and a perfectly fair market. You don't even know the identity of the market maker or the currencies that you're using. All you're looking for is the cheapest path.
Wow.
And there you have it. I tell you, that is, when I hear that, some people get the knee-jerk reaction of, my God, what if the U.S. did eventually launch the USD as the reserve currency on the Ripple protocol? What would that mean for XRP? Well, I think it means exactly the way David broke it down, even from 8 years ago. It means that you still have the opportunity to serve an open, perfectly free market, and what would be used with what would be the best, safest path and the easiest, most affordable, efficient path. And if that happens to be USD to Euro, then it's USD to Euro. I'm reminded again of R3's report, the Fed coin, and David Andelfato discussing the USD peg and about how you could use XRP in that scenario. And he uses a scenario here basically where he talks about the Federal Reserve could introduce a $200 bill and set it as a peg 2-to-1 to $100 bills. You know the denominations from there. And they could basically introduce that new digital dollar using XRP, right? It's pretty interesting, this concept. Now,
it's different with dollars.
Now, let me go a little further here, because I want to take you through this, because Saudi Arabia, UAE, and Iran joining Brics, invited to join Brics January 1, 2024, which means 80% of the world's oil production would then be inside of Brics along with the other nations. Now, number one, we have to remember it was the gold standard that underpinned the US dollar originally. And then it was the Petrodollar agreement to continue to underpin the US dollar as the global reserve currency. What would be next? Could it be the XRP ledger that they're preparing for? If the US dollar were to launch as the global reserve currency on the XRP ledger, instead of me looking at it as the US dollar would be competing with XRP, that wouldn't be the case. What I see is, because of the BRICS coalition and other small exotic corridors, it may be more efficient for XRP to serve those areas, because they don't want to play into supporting the role of the US dollar. This could also help to isolate spillover shocks in such a transitional moment in the monetary system as well on a global stage. We don't yet know the answer, but we do know that doing nothing is not an option. Then I want to remind people of this clip from James Wallace, which I've played bunches of times, but listen to it in context of what we've just gone over here. James Wallace explaining that mBridge is in fact, XRPLedger is in fact one of the mBridge pilots that's happening here. And listen to what he says about how CBDCs are the native currency, not XRP on the ledger. And that plays into exactly what David said as well. Take a listen.
Right, we're using the same technology that is with the XRP ledger. The token would be the CBDC, right? So the central bank would actually create their own token, a digital euro, digital dollar, whatever the market is, and that becomes the digital asset.
So that becomes the digital asset. Keep listening.
The native coin.
The native coin, yeah. Now, where XRP could come into play potentially is when you're looking at cross-border CBDC. So when you have a digital dollar and you have a digital, real, or digital pound, you obviously need to have some way to interact cross-border. Yeah. So I think the BIS call this a multi-CBDC model. One of the ideas is you use a sort of a neutral bridge currency to go from one to the other, similar to the model I explained earlier, with our on-demand liquidity. But the core offering really is not XRP. There's no XRP involved. It's the native token is the CBDC.
And the best incentive is no incentive, right? It's not to force someone to use XRP. It's to provide a system where XRP could be used in the best case scenario for the market maker and market participant. That's the key. And that's how you open things up for everybody to use them. Now, combine that as we close out here, understanding that automated market makers are very close to making their way to the ledger, and they're being tested right now and voted on. So what do we know? We know the BIS likes crypto assets that have stabilization mechanisms, whether that means a pegged asset or a stabilization mechanism, possibly like automated market makers. If that be the case, it could potentially classify XRP in the Group 1B category for all central banks of the world, even the BIS, and that would take it out of the high-risk danger zone of Group 2 crypto assets like Bitcoin. And if you can minimize the slippage and the arbitrage with automated market makers and giant liquidity pools of XRP, who knows? Maybe you do see the USD launch as a reserve currency on the XRP ledger. What do you think that would do to validate its existence? Not financial advice from me or anyone else. It's just my digital perspectives. I'll catch all of you on the next one.